Welcome to the latest and first in a while installment of the Run to Daylight show. I'm your host, Todd Burrows, and I'm joined today by the Lord himself, Lord Reeves, Rich Rebar. Rich is definitely has OG status. He is all excited as the big reveal for the schedule with Sharp Football Analysis is coming up soon. I'm excited because I'm drafting again after really for the first time in 10 years, taking some time off. I took off pre-draft, and I got to be honest, I feel a little lost. So what I asked Rich to do today was to make a list, and I've made a list of my favorite values on the board and some of my big avoids. And let's see if Rich and I are kind of coming up with a lot of the same names, or if he's able to enlighten me because I just haven't put enough time in yet. This podcast is brought to you by our friends over at the FFPC. If you've ever played on the FFPC, you know it is my favorite tournament. I will probably do about 30 this year. I'm going to be down volume wise dollar. I'm buying a house, and 2 years of losing, you got to cut back some money. Um, when you're winning every year, you keep raising and raising the amount you spend. Well, it's the opposite if you have bad years. I'm kind of going back to basics. I will do a podcast about that soon. Some of my takeaways from last year, ways to improve. But the FFPC $300,000 grand prize for the best ball tournament. It's my favorite tournament because you are profitable on every team that you advance immediately. $125 entry. Most teams that advance make 300. So you're far less dependent on that one team going far. So that's something that fits into my game, something I got away from last year. The FFPC also has a variety of things. I'm waiting to start a $100 dynasty league. They have empire leagues. They have $2 million tournaments. And if you've never played on the FFPC and you love fantasy football, what I love so much about the FFPC is the scoring, because it is tight end premium, and you have two flexes and you only start two wide receivers, which makes strategizing in each draft a unique opportunity. If you've never played there before, use the code DAYLIGHT when you sign in to get $25 off your first team. That's $25 off with the code DAYLIGHT. Go to myffpc.com and check it out. Rich, thank you for doing this. It's always a pleasure to chop it up with you. How are you, and how's your off season been?
Things are going good. Like you said, I mean, the dynasty leagues, post draft have all been kind of, wrapped up. Got a couple rookie drafts like slowly straggling on here towards the end of the later round picks. But with the NFL draft in the books, it's kind of everyone's got their eye on the prize now of looking like really full speed, like towards the 2025 season. We'll have the schedule come out on Thursday, and that's kind of like the last like missing piece outside some veteran free agent signings. But everyone's dialed in now, like, here we are honing our strategy for the 2025 season.
Yeah. And, there's advantages and disadvantages to playing best ball this early. One of the advantages is that you can take bets on where the market's going to be, right? If you think well, and that's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on both. We'll start with, I'll throw out the first one. How's that?
Sure, go for it.
My favorite ADP so far is Tony Pollard. I think that Tony Pollard had a very good year. He got injured, but he definitely looked like the Tony Pollard that we had seen before that weird, what do they call that injury? That
he had what do you have, like a tightrope, similar
tightrope, right?
Tightrope,
yeah. And normally the tightrope is what I call going out on a date with me, but for Tony Pollard, it was a actual surgery. People recover slowly. I'm a big Tajay Spears fan, but I just think that seventh, eighth round, Tony Pollard is stealing money right now, Rich. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I have no qualms about it. I mean, you're looking at the Titans potentially being like an undervalued team in general, based on, if Cam Ward, has any type of functionality. I mean, this is a team that just got bottom rung quarterback play last year. I mean, 27th in success rate, no matter which quarterback they had in the game. 20% of their dropbacks lost over an EPA or more. That was 31st in the NFL. So if they're just able to play better, you've got upside in that angle. And then the offensive line looks to be better on paper, which was a huge problem. I mean, you look at both their running backs last year, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. There was 46 running backs last year at 100 or more carries. Pollard was, 43rd on that list in yards before contact, and Tajay Spears was 40th. They just didn't have a lot created for them. The interior of the line looks pretty good, though. I mean, you get Skronsky in year 3. Cushenberry only played in 7 games last year, so having him healthy back on the field, and they added Kevin Zeitler, veteran, kind of tried and true, old man Zeitler just never really misses time, is a good in the run game. So that interior looks good. So, I mean, I have really no problems with Tony Pollard. You're just hoping that you can get some touchdowns out of him.
Yeah. And I mean, even with that horrific OL and with a quarterback who couldn't keep players off the line, Pollard had a good bit of explosive plays last year and was doing very well for best ball. And basically, he's going a little bit later at ADP than where he finished last year. You improve the OL, you improve the quarterback play. I'm on Tony Pollard. I'm glad you don't disagree, but you didn't exactly say that's one of my guys either.
Yeah, so I'm pretty neutral on Tony Pollard.
Okay. Let's get your first
No
name.
No problems either way. I actually have a wild card because I like to go rogue. My first thing's an entire team. I think an entire team is mispriced. It's the San Francisco 49ers. This is a team that's like screaming positive regression, everyone's favorite fantasy word in general, our favorite phrase. But this team in general, you look at last year, they were 26th in touchdowns scored below expectations. They were supposed to be 4th in the NFL in expected touchdowns scored. They finished 12th in actual touchdowns. They only ran 60 total plays with everyone healthy. Now they trade Deebo Samuel this offseason, but everyone else looks back. All their question marks look to be on defense versus offense, which could be a fantasy bonanza if they do struggle.
That could be actually, that's one of those underrated things.
Yeah, so if they do struggle defensively, especially to rush the passer, and they're giving up points, and the offense is back healthy, this is a team that has just a ton of upside in general. And then they also, as a cherry on top of all this, like projected, positive regression, they have the easiest schedule. The official schedule order comes out Thursday, but we already know all the opponents. We're just looking for the order, and they have the easiest projected schedule. They actually have 10 games against opponents that are projected to have win totals of 7 or 5 or less, and the highest correlation into terms of using projected wins and as a barometer are these teams that have bad teams. We're really good at projecting bad teams, and we're harder at projecting good teams. That inherently makes a lot of sense because good teams have a lot more fragility. If you're projected for 10 wins, a lot more can go wrong to where you don't hit that win total. But if you're projected to be a bad team, a lot has to go right. Usually, like, we have pretty good diagnosis of your roster that's going to be bad. Well, the 49ers have 10 games against teams that are projected to win 7 or 5, 7.5 games or less this season. So, I mean, like, I look at everything line up for them. Like, this offense is completely underpriced. And it starts at the very top. I mean, Christian McCaffrey right now at the 1-2 turn is like an absolute gift right now. I understand, like, he is a player that's missed time, but he is still the best fantasy player when in all fantasy football when he's on the field. And we're playing to win these tournaments. Like, and you're getting a player at like basically the largest discount he's ever had. Even last year, when the small sample when he played, the usage is elite in a Kyle Shanahan system. I mean, he was on the field for 89% of the offensive snaps, had 67% of the team's rushing attempts, 19% of the team's targets, all the goal to go usage. Now they also moved Jordan Mason. So, like, Jordan Mason's not even going to cut into that if you were worried about him. I mean, it starts at the top, but I actually think every offensive player is mispriced on this team, even including, George Kittle, all the receivers, what your flavor of choice is, and then Brock Purdy in general too.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Purdy, which, because he doesn't have a running component. But I will say that, first of all, I want to say that the San Francisco wide receivers were on my list
Oh,
of
okay.
so we have one match so far. And I didn't put Christian McCaffrey, but I, typically the last 3 or 4 years, I've hated drafting at the turn, that 10, 11, 12.
Mhm.
This year, to be able to come away with one of Malik Neighbors, Puka Nacua, Brian Thomas Jr., and often be able to come back with Christian McCaffrey, to me is just fantastic. And I like Kittle too. They just signed him to a big contract. He's a human spike week. But my it took me a little while to wrap my head around Jimmy Pearsall, but I saw that Matt Harmon actually rated him very well. I had mostly been taking Juwan Jennings. I think he proved that he is for real. And I'm going to wait a little bit on Brandon Ayuk, mainly because I think we're going to get an injury discount because people, I know I heard you on another podcast say that you feel like it's already built in, but I don't know that it is. He is that type of guy that I could see coming back slow. And we saw last year when he didn't, practice much, that he started out slow. So I'm more focusing on Jennings and Pearsall right now, but you like Ayuk as well, correct?
Yeah, I like all three of them, kind of your flavor of choice. I do like Ayuk now because I'm not necessarily worried about the slow start because you're drafting me as a bench receiver already
Right.
off rip. So if he just catches some touchdowns the front half of the year, you might run into a week where he slides into your lineup. But I'm more focused on his upside towards the end of the season because I brought this up with Matt when he was on my show, is that when the 49ers probably fall into their base offense, like probably down the home stretch when everyone's healthy, it probably does signal that Jennings is probably going to be more of that guy that plays into the slot and rotates at flanker with Pearsall. So I do think Ayuk, when he's full go towards like the stretch run of the season, he's going to be the guy that's on the field the full allotment of snaps. Because remember, the 49ers are also a team that they're not just going to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, even if they do increase more of a traditional pass rate with the removal of Deebo Samuel. This is still a team that's going to run a lot of 2 wide receivers.
Didn't the blocking guy, the fullback,
They brought him back. They brought
they did
Juszczyk
bring him
back.
Okay.
Yeah, Juszczyk they brought back.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, historically you got Juszczyk in there a good bit, which means you're not going 3 wide receivers when he's on the field. I think it's good. I'm still holding out hope for my boy Jacob Cowing. He was one of my favorite tapes, but hopefully he can hit the field when the season starts. And Ayuk might not be ready, but we'll see about that. My next one is one I don't know that you're going to agree with, but Jalen Waddle is a guy that I'm pretty high on right now. And my thought process is this: Tyreek Hill, first of all, Waddle's been hurt each of the last 2 years. And, I think it's easy to forget just how explosive he is. The last 2 years, he was going late second, early third round. Now you can get him in the 5th round of drafts. And Tyreek Hill showed that either he was hurt or on the downswing last year, and now he's going back for a second surgery. I don't know, Rich. I really like taking a chance that Waddle is the 1A on this, San Francisco type offense.
I think I'm fine with both Dolphins wide receivers, especially even Tyreek where he's going. I mean, there's obviously a significant discount here. The one kind of element here that's in place for the Miami Dolphins, though, is like the state of this offensive line and can it hold up? Because this is what absolutely wrecked this team. I mean, you look at when you have 2 receivers like Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, defensively, those teams want to combat that by playing a lot of over-the-top coverage. because they just don't have guys as fast. They don't have human beings as fast as those two wide receivers. Well, what happened last year was teams started to play a lot of coverage because the Miami Dolphins couldn't punish them with the run game. I mean, you look at the historical, trends of this system, the 49ers we just talked about. If you're going to play coverage, well, guess what? We're going to run the football because we're going to have a fullback on the field, and we're going to have a tight end on the field. We're going to run the football. The Dolphins couldn't do that last year. They were absolutely hideous rushing team. They were actually second to worst behind the Raiders in terms of offensive efficiency per running back run last year, which is criminal for like the Shanahan system and what we saw for 2 years of this team. Obviously they lose their best offensive lineman in Terron Armstead. We'll see if some of the young players they drafted can slide in and play, but this on paper is an offensive line that has a lot of issues, and it impacted the passing game because now they couldn't get any explosives because teams are playing coverage. If they're not respecting the run, they only have 3 passing touchdowns from outside of the red zone last year. They were in double digits the first 2 years under Mike McDaniel. All of Tua's downfield passing performance stuff all plummeted last year. I mean, look at he only attempted 27% of his passes 10 or more yards downfield. That was 34th in the NFL last year. It was at 45% in 2022, 36% the year prior. He led the NFL in targets behind the line of scrimmage. That's why Jonnu and Devin Achane had the seasons they had as receivers, because there's all this stuff works together. It's all symbiotic. So if the offensive line does play better, we open up some more, holes in the run game, and that's going to just inherently bring some defenders back up into the box, and then you're going to be able to hit some of these big plays that we had those first 2 years in the Mike McDaniel offense. So that's kind of the big question mark. But this is another team that definitely, I think some of the regression is priced in on both these players, and you're going to take nibbles on these guys on the upside outcome that they can figure this out. You just hope that the Dolphins don't get dealt a really bad hand to open the year, because both Mike McDaniel and the GM, Greer, like these guys are on the chopping block. Like these dudes could be fired before midway of the season if they get a bad, schedule hand to open the year on Thursday. We'll see what happens, because this is a team that they haven't beat anyone good since Mike McDaniel's been there. 4-16 against teams that have made the playoffs. If they come out with a really bad schedule and they start out of the block slow, like we could see like a total upheaval here, and then kind of maybe a lost season.
Yeah, I mean, that is, and again, that is why I wanted to have you on, to check a lot of my thoughts. And the tackle that they did have, the one really good tackle they did have isn't there anymore. I forget his name.
Terron Armstead.
He retired. They did take that big kid, but they drafted him early. I don't even want to attempt to pronounce his name. All right, let's get your oh, by the way, if you guys have any questions for Rich or I, definitely you can put them into the comments on StreamYard. I think I will get them, and we will be happy to show your questions on the screen. So Rich, throw another name out at me that you're on.
I'm going to stay in the NFC West. I actually have one more NFC West guy too. I'm going to start with Kenneth Walker. This will be when we do some of the overvalued guys just in this price range, kind of, there's some symmetry here of why some of these guys are here. But Kenneth Walker is another one of these guys that, from a workload perspective, had everything we wanted last year. Just another team where the offensive line kind of fell apart. They have made a couple of additions here. Obviously they get Zay Grable in the first round, but the Clint Kubiak hire is, again, from this coaching tree that we talked about already with the opening guys with, Shanahan and McDaniel, and what he was able to do. Remember, people forget, like, the start of the Saints season, it wasn't just those first 2 games, obviously, where they went absolutely nuclear, the opening 2 games. All the way up until like everyone started to die on the Saints. This was an efficient offense. And this is an efficient offense in terms of generating touchdowns in the goal to go area. The New Orleans was number 1 in goal to go efficiency last year. Seattle was 28th. So we can get, some extra touchdowns here for Kenneth Walker. For Kenneth Walker as a player was still everything we wanted last year. I mean, he was still, 11th in missed tackle rate. He's still breaking a bunch of tackles. He just wasn't getting any yards before contact in the state of this offensive line. The outside zone scheme itself is going to create some holes. Obviously adding a, interior guard is going to help some things out. And then the play action pass, like Ryan Grubb just he put no easy buttons in that Seattle offense to overcome all the deficiencies that they had in terms of offensive line play. And you're just going to have those things now in place with Klint Kubiak. This isn't just going to be a team that's just ramrodding itself out with the same offensive approach every week that isn't working. So Kenneth Walker is definitely a guy in the RB2 range that I'm looking at. It's like saying, all right, he's a guy that has definitely double-digit touchdown potential. He's catching passes. It's been increasing every year. So with Klint Kubiak coming in there, he's next on my list.
Yeah, and the coaching staff showed they really liked Walker, right? Like we all wanted Charbonnet to be a thing, and until Walker got hurt, Charbonnet wasn't the thing. I still think Charbonnet is a decent pick in case Walker gets hurt, but I also like Martinez, the guy that they got late in the draft. I don't know why he fell as far as he did. He was one of the better tapes that I watched of the running backs this year. But I like Walker, and I'm, again, really glad to get that thought, because my initial thought was that, Darnold is one of those guys who could really go either way, right?
Right.
He had the coach whisper last year, and he still blew up at times, and blew up in bad ways. So with the OL, still not being great, I was a little hesitant on Walker, but I like that you went over that. So the next guy I'm going to throw out there is, okay, we got a question, Rich. We're going to take a break. Best ball on call is Jonty Bowers. Both or neither wrong at ADP. I'm going to let you swing at this one, Rich.
Well, I think that Bowers at his ADP is definitely a player I'm not particularly gravitating towards. Now, less so on FFPC versus the other other sites. His ADP on the other sites, I believe, is pretty outlandish. It's almost in a stay away zone for me, because one, I actually have him closer to the pack, and in these tournaments, these best ball tournaments, and that, obviously you get the tight end premium here in the FFPC if we're just sticking to that.
He's going top 5 in the FFPC though.
Yeah, which is still very rich. I mean, I want, first of all, I have McBride as my tight end one anyways.
Do you really?
Yes, but I have him closer to the pack, and in these tournaments, you just open the field up. So if you're taking a player at like the old Travis Kelce ADP, he's really the only guy that like sustained having like top 5 FFPC ADP year in and year out, because he was giving you like wide receiver 1 production. And Bowers flirted with that at moments last year, but he still was closer to the pack than I think anyone kind of remembers. First of all, he wasn't even first in points per game. Just McBride and Kittle missed some time. Both those guys were as good as him on a per game basis. So and when you're talking about like a season long league versus best ball, in a season long league, a player like Bowers gives you like a weekly advantage, right, over basically the field. But the field now, under the premises of one, best ball in general, where just guys are going to get the field their best lineup, and then they're going to be able to flag you down just a lot easier than so you lose a little bit of that. So the opportunity cost is what I'm saying. Work myself around here to what I was trying to get to, is that the opportunity cost is.
I'm going to jump in because that's my problem with Jonty. I've got Jonty behind Brian Thomas Jr., behind Puka Nacua, behind Malik Neighbors. He could be great, but the opportunity cost of taking a running back there, one we've never seen in the pros, one that, despite how good he was in college, played for a smaller school. I'm not avoiding Jonty, but right now I'm heading towards under, because I just think there's 5 or 6 wide receivers that are just better than everyone else, and I'm not going to pass on an opportunity to take one of them very often. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I have Jonty as as kind of like a mid-second rounder in full PPR.
Yeah.
So like you usually can't get him there, unfortunately. So just kind of boxed out on the price. But I mean, yeah, the opportunity cost, like I said, for like taking the tight end one, like it's really only ever paid off with one player historically. So like that's why I have such a hard time at that type of ADP. We had a couple years where like the top tight ends were going like in the second round even at FFPC. but like taking a tight end amongst like guys that can be like drop elite hammers like at wide receiver and running back, it's just that's not my preferred style of play. I can see more, and I think it actually gets lessened in these best ball tournaments versus the season long stuff. That's why I have such a hard time taking them. But
yeah, in best ball, well, I got a not so humble brag. I did $100 dynasty last year, and my two tight ends are Bowers and McBride.
and
So
Bowers was one of my favorite players at ADP last year. It sucked.
I mean,
I hate when
so
the same thing happened
when,
with Laporta though. I was hammering Laporta 2 years ago, and then last year it's like the price. I can't do it there.
right, and you know what? Historically, off a big wide receiver year, they tend to go a little higher than I'm comfortable with. And every year there's some, when you look, let me go over to the ADP at tight end right now. And I don't have a ton of favorites, but if the choice is Bowers at 15 or Kittle at 52,
Yeah.
I'm probably looking Kittle. But my favorite tight end ADP right now is Jake Ferguson at 137. I felt like last year we got Jake Ferguson jumped too far and I faded him, but now he's kind of fallen back to where I think he's a value. I also like Dallas Goedert at ADP, but there's no tight ends that I'm just in love with. I think Pat Freiermuth is a pretty good pick at ADP right now as well, Rich.
Yeah, I think that's what's floating, Bowers and McBride definitely at the top, but there's even like a little bit of gap if you just want to take McBride. There's a little, I think the gap is fine to do, just to be on McBride more so at cost than it is, Bowers in general. But you're right, it flattens out definitely this year. Definitely looking at the ADP, because I did pull up just like my ranks and like the ADP just to kind of see some of the guys that I was like the furthest away from. And what's funny is the guy Dallas Goedert's number one on my list in terms of difference. I don't have him on my list here, but he's number one in terms of where I have him ranked versus his actual ADP.
So you agree with me as one of the better.
And the thing with Goddard too is you never get the contingency stuff priced in with him. Like, if AJ Brown and Devontae Smith miss time, he always gets a bump, and that's not being priced in right now. The other guys that I have, one of the guys you mentioned, so I've got 5 tight ends that are 25 spots off of ADP. Dallas Goedert was first, then David Njoku, which obviously, people are definitely scared of the quarterback position.
Can I guess?
Well, one is Jake Ferguson, so I'll remove one. There's 2 left.
All right. So my other ones, I've gotten a couple, but Cade Otton is one of my other guys that I've been attracted to later, and Brenton Strange are guys that I feel like could end up with being good picks. I don't know that they're going to win you the league, but I think they'll keep you close enough that the guys you do take instead of the early tight ends could win you the league.
Yeah, I've got Brenton Strange as the 4th one, so you got that one, and the last one is Evan Ingram. Going his transition to Denver. I definitely think that Evan Ingram is not going to run as many pass routes as he did the year he was the tight end 1. But in these tight end premium leagues, I mean, look at everyone that's been in this role. No one that's succeeded has really been as good a player as Evan Ingram. Now, I'm not putting Evan Ingram in the Jimmy Graham class. What I am putting him in the same class as is James Cook and Colby Fleener and Ben Watson. No, these are all guys that had tight end 1 seasons in this role in the Sean Payton offense. So I definitely believe he's just going to instantly slot in the number 2 in targets behind Courtland Sutton in that offense.
That's a guy you just turned me around on, because I had forgotten that. And again, when you take time off and you're not looking at everything, so that's a really good one. Best Ball on Call also asked about Mason Taylor. I like Taylor's tape better than I thought I would. His measurables were not very impressive, but he certainly has the opportunity. Rich, your thoughts?
He's probably someone I'll be a little bit more hesitant on, but also I have no problems like where Mason Taylor goes in drafts. Like I have no pushback on shooting your that's
Right.
a shoot your shot
Right.
tight end.
Exactly.
If you really like a player there, do not let me talk you out of them. My biggest hurdle for the Jets pass catchers is the Jets pass thrower in Justin Fields. On his third team in 3 seasons, I just don't trust him as a player that can facilitate like these high end fantasy seasons. And that will probably come up again later on in the show.
Well, it's funny you mention that because the next guy I'm going to mention is Justin Fields. So, and not be,
Justin
what,
Fields himself, I'm into.
right. Okay, good. Because I feel like everyone and their mother, all the cool kids last year, were just all in on Justin Fields in the 18th round when there was significant reason to believe he wasn't going to play a lot.
Yes.
Right. Whether we agreed with the decision, and that's a big mistake that we sometimes make in fantasy, is we put what we would do and what we think teams should do in when these teams do what they think they should do. And Russ just, made them feel more warm and cozy. But the Jets are basically bringing him in, and he's the guy, and they don't not looking at him necessarily as a long-term answer. And what we saw out of Justin Fields is a rarity, the ability to really separate at the quarterback position because of what he can do with his legs. And because he'll be one of 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks on my roster in best ball, I don't need him every week. But boy, if I get 1 or 2 40-point weeks when I need them, I am very, very into Justin Fields, and I don't feel the need to stack him. Rich, your thoughts overall on Justin Fields?
Yeah, that's the best part, is you don't have to feel that need to kind of push it. You can run him solo. Absolutely. That's by far the most alluring part.
And he makes big plays. As a passer, he's just not consistent as a passer, right? But we saw those 40-point weeks, him and Cole Kmet hook up on some really big plays. Back to the Mason Taylor thing. All right. So
he did make some small strides as a passer in the very brief sample we saw him with Arthur Smith. It's going to be interesting to see how he works with Tanner Engstrand, because we don't know anything about Tanner Engstrand. Like the most appealing thing about Tanner Engstrand is like, we know he was like working under Ben Johnson. So like, how far does that go? Like, what does that buy us? We don't really know. And this also could turn into like a 1-year rental with them too. Like, it could just be a kicking the can thing for the Jets, but he's going to basically be the guy this year. So like, it's not a situation like you said with last year where you're worried about him getting benched. You're worried about how many starts he makes. Like, he's going to be out there. And if you get a running quarterback that's going to just be on the field, like, you're going to run into default weeks. I mean, even last year, he was still top 5 in fantasy points per drop back because he runs the football. And this year, compared to previous years, we don't have a lot of those Konami guys this year. This year is actually pretty barren. Last year, we had, Jaden Daniels. Like, we talked about Jaden Daniels at nauseum all season. By far, like, was my favorite player at ADP last year.
You and me both. He was my most owned quarterback.
But you even had guys like, Bo Nix, and now Bo Nix's ADP is up. Like, we don't. All the pocket passers are like all the QB2 zone. Like, Justin Fields is the only runner in that strike zone of like QB12 to like QB20. He's the only runner.
Yeah. So Mad Sox mentioned A-Rich. I will definitely be taking some shots on A-Rich.
Yeah.
I mean,
in best ball, these formats. Yeah.
As a Giants fan, I've seen enough of Daniel Jones. So if A-Rich can, anyway.
The problem is you only take Anthony Richardson in these best balls or these super flex leagues because for the upside angle. But if you're placing bets, no Colts guy starting the whole year.
Right. Well, before we jump too far away from tight end, I want to throw out my sleeper tight end. It's Oronde Gadsden. And I really liked his tape. His dad was an NFL player. The Chargers, did they trade up for him?
I don't remember. He was definitely a day 3 guy though.
Yeah, but I think he's the kind of big play guy that if he finds the way to the field, he could, with Justin Herbert, he could give you some big weeks. I'm not saying go out and get 30% Oronde Gadsden, but that's as we head toward camp where we look for more information, that's a guy that I'm going to be keeping an eye on, Rich.
Where are you on being the Giants guy? Where are you on Theo Johnson? He was starting to show some life before the injury at the end of last year, and obviously we know the quarterback situation is at least better.
Well, I think that Theo Johnson is a very reasonable pick, but he's not exciting.
Right, exactly.
Right. Bellinger is still there. But I took him in a dynasty league where he was back in the pool in the FFPC, and I'm really weak at tight end in that league. So I took a shot on him. I think he will be the starter, and I think his ADP is a little too low. But he's not exactly somebody I'm going to get excited about.
I do think out of the rookie tight ends,
that could be wrong.
Out of the rookie tight ends, I think Elijah Arroyo is probably in the best spot for like spike weeks. There's definitely be weeks where he has like 3 targets or 0 targets, but the way he's going to be utilized in that system, he's going to get shot play targets off of the play action in that just system inherently. And they've already talked about, they drafted him more to be a downfield threat. All the post-draft, conversation between Kubiak and McDonald was talking about his downfield ability. Yeah. And that's kind of what everyone was kind of figuring out, how the marriage of like Cooper Kupp and JSN are going to work in this Kubiak system. But Arroyo is probably going to run into some really shot plays. And there's probably weeks where he just maybe catches a long pass or a long touchdown. And that's enough to float you at his ADP to just crack your lineup.
Yeah, no, I was disappointed because my favorite rookie tight end was Fannin. And he ended up behind Njoku, so
he's more of a dynasty guy now.
He needs an injury.
Yeah, he's more of a dynasty
he was
player.
Raw to begin with. Yeah. So I definitely. All right, your turn. Throw me out another name on the like if you have one.
My like kind of ties into one of your likes a little bit, but the most mispriced quarterback for me right now, and it was before this week, and this week only helped. It was Dak Prescott. I mean, this is another team that's just screaming again. I'm gonna use positive regression again. I know everyone hates it, but the Dallas Cowboys scored 11 touchdowns below expectations last year. They were the worst in the league in differential. The offense cratered after Dak Prescott left. They were 28th in points per drive after he left the lineup. They scored a touchdown on a league worst 13.7% of possessions. He's been, before last year, he was top 8 in fantasy points per game in 4 of the 5 years prior to that. And then this addition of George Pickens is sensational for Dak Prescott. Even if Pickens doesn't have a role change, which me and Matt Harmon talked about potentially could still happen, where he gets a little bit more than people think, like we saw with T. Higgins last year. That potential exists in the range of outcomes for George Pickens, but his addition is absolute pure simpatico with where Dak Prescott wins as a pass thrower. He obviously is going to hook up CeeDee Lamb, but George Pickens, 28% of his career targets, 20 or more yards downfield. Since entering the NFL, Dak Prescott is 4th in the NFL in rating on those throws, 20 or more yards downfield. And think of the list of guys that he's been throwing downfield targets to. He obviously had Amari, but we're talking, guys like Michael Gallup, the ghost of Brandon Cooks. Even Jalen Tolbert had a little hot run last year before Dak got hurt. He's number 8 of all QBs in accuracy on those throws. And Brian Schottenheimer throws the football more than I think people realize. Obviously, he's been with Dallas the past 2 years, but even his last year in Seattle, he was right at pass rate, like right at expectations in terms of neutral pass rate. So this is a head coach that, was an OC, but people kind of think about him in those Pete Carroll offenses. Like he's kind of adjusted since, he was let go in Seattle. Like I said, even that last year in Seattle, he threw the ball more. So Brian Schottenheimer is definitely going to think of, or Dak's going to be one of these guys that's probably going to be top 5, top 8 in dropbacks, if not even higher, especially when you look at the running back situation. Like this team is screaming they're going to throw the football. So definitely Dak Prescott's number.
And they improved the offensive line, and Pickens is the perfect complement to CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
They win in different places. Dak's my most owned quarterback, so we are very in early drafting. I've got about 30% Dak to start, And I am a little disappointed, only because now he's going to become more popular now that Pickens is there. I think he was to use an overused phrase, he was a possible generational wealth opportunity guy, before. My next name, so Goddard was on my list, and Bashal Tutin is another guy that's on my list. So basically, he is a guy whose tape I liked, but I also saw some flaws in. But what he does well is big plays. You go into his ADP is being held back because both ETN and Bigsby are there, right? So the assumption is he's got to fight his way to the B role, and that he doesn't have an opportunity really at the A role. When he does, right? He could be the lead back in that offense. And I think that, Bigsby played better last year, but I'm just not a Bigsby guy. ETN, I think if you told me your guy out of that backfield was ETN because the ADP is so low and the talent, but I would rather shoot for the fences a bit, Rich, with Bashal Tutin.
I mean, the problem with being all in on ETN, because I can see some people saying, all right, well, he had the 1,400-yard seasons, before last year, but he basically has a foot out the door with the organization. That's what makes it so hard to like really get that excited about it. I mean, Liam Cohen comes in immediately, and the first thing he talked about after taking Bashal Tutin was explosive plays and wanting to have explosive plays in the run game. Right. And like, so it's just like they definitely drafted him for that mindset. It's just that you're hoping that he rounds out the rest of his game, because Tutin, while he creates a lot of big plays, and his tape is littered with creating big plays, he runs himself into outs a lot. That's like his body, I think, is moving faster than his brain is processing. He's like that type of player. And I think once everything kind of marriages up in the NFL, that's when you'll see him like really.
He doesn't have my favorite guy with feel, for the whole was Neal, the guy who ended up in New Orleans. I thought he had, I hate to use the term Le'Veon Bell-like feel, but that was a guy that I felt when I watched Neal, I got a little bit of Le'Veon Bell vibes.
I actually I like that comp because he does play like, he's not the world's greatest athlete like Le'Veon. Le'Veon wasn't either. But Le'Veon was like a huge, like adjusted agility guy for his size, for
patience,
how big he was.
Ability to find a hole, and enough explosion to hit the hole once he found it. And that's what I saw with Neal. But
because in the NFL, you're not gonna get the years like Saquon had last year, right? Like the holes are smaller, they tighten up. You don't get as many 15-yard runs as he did in college. You're relying on you creating, you need to create those the runs that look like they're gonna be 3 to 4 yards. You need to turn those into 5 to 7s, right? Like those are you live on those.
And if you find a hole and get a 12-yard gain, you do that 4 or 5 times. You get into the end zone once, and you pay off for fantasy. You've got Kamara now really getting up there in age.
Neal's pretty interesting because the landing spot.
Yeah. So I know that Kendra Miller's still there. It's not, and the NFL did not like Devin Neal as much as I did. The guy that the NFL didn't like as much as I did last year was Ray Davis, and Ray Davis didn't land as well as I thought. But when he got a chance, he showed why I liked him. So I think that Neal is that guy. Tutin was a guy that I think you covered it really well. He doesn't have the feel for the hole, but when he finds the hole, boy, he knows what to do with it. That was my last guy. Rich, do you have one more for me on the upside guys before we move over?
Well, I have one more guy that I guess I'm just going to keep taking him until his career is completely over, but definitely underpriced for what, especially because he's rewarded us 2 years in a row, and it's James Conner. James Conner's not one of these guys like plotting his way. Like he's been hyper efficient these past 2 years. I mean, even last year, 49 plays of 10 or more yards, fifth amongst all running backs, and he was healthy. He played the whole season. He missed the right last game of the regular season, due to precautionary reasons because there was no reason to really play him.
One of my big sayings is people aren't healthy till they are.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I feel about that's why I like Jalen Waddle, because he hasn't been healthy, but the assumption that a guy fourth year in the league won't be healthy, we've seen the James Conner effect. I like that one.
Yeah, I mean, he's been hyper efficient in this Drew Petzing offense. Drew Petzing, like we have a lot of qualms, like there are questions about him. Great, like when this team has to throw, and it might be a Kyler thing. It might not even be a Drew Petzing thing. It could be. It might be a chicken or egg, kind of conundrum that we don't have a firm answer on yet. But when he needs to design a run game, like he's been excellent 2 years. Like this Arizona run game for 2 years in a row has been hyper efficient, and it's helmed by James Conner. We did not see him give an inch to Trey Benson last year, and
and I was not a Benson's tape was not. It was okay, right? And basically, what we saw out of Benson last year was what I saw on tape. And we're going to get to the guys I don't like. I've talked about a bunch about all the tape I've watched and how good I was. The guy, but before we get to the guy that I got wrong last year, who I still am having trouble taking, I do want to throw out one other guy I really like is, oh geez, now I can't think of his name. The lead wide receiver for the Falcons.
Oh, Drake London.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Drake London could, with Michael Penix, could have just a massive year. And so again, that back half of the draft where you can get a Neighbors, a Puka, a Brian Thomas, and come back with a CMC or a now his name just went out of my head again.
Yeah, London.
Yeah, Drake London. Yeah. So old guy.
I have London higher than his ADP too. I mean. Yeah, he had 100-yard game with Cousins, went over 100 yards 2 of the 3 with Penix. Because of the downfield throws, right? He got more downfield targets paired with being in that, slot role.
But he's going to have the floor of getting 5-6 catches every week on the short stuff.
And their defense is another team. I know they added a couple pass rushers at the front of the draft, but this defense is not good still on paper. The Falcons are going to be a bonanza team. They have potential to be a bonanza team.
All right. First guy for me that I just can't get to is Bucky Irving. I was wrong on Bucky Irving. I didn't like his tape all that much coming out, but Rachaad White is still there. The other kid is still there. I just think if he was a mid-third round pick, I'd be taking some Bucky Irving. I just think the opportunity cost in the second round is too much for me. Rich, am I wrong?
I don't know if you're wrong, but he is definitely a player that I haven't found myself clicking a lot just because, if you're a dynasty player, like we've seen a lot of these like day 3 running backs have really pop as rookies, have like these breakout seasons, and then they kind of get overvalued in year 2. We could be having one of those situations, right? Like him and Chase Brown are players I have no problem with at all. If you want to take them, they just aren't guys that I click very often.
I haven't been taking a lot of Chase Brown either, and he was one of my most owned guys last year.
Right.
But again, the real one of the only edges left in fantasy, Rich, is being able to take your foot off the gas when everyone else has their foot on the gas. And the assumption that Chase Brown is going to have the role he had down the stretch.
No one will have that role. I mean, he literally had 95% of the backfield touches out of necessity.
But he's a third round pick, and I think it really is different. I don't mind. I've taken Chase Brown. I just haven't been able to get to Bucky so far.
I kind of, like I said, I put both of those guys in kind of the same boat. I don't really have a lot of pushback. I think as players, I do like them and I like what they bring to the table. It's just been a cost. It's just been cost prohibitive at this point. And basically on then early builds, like some things could shift and it could turn out where those guys fall a half round. And the way I'm building my teams, like they start to fit the structure in a different pocket of the summer. But to open things out, like they've just been in a position to where I've been mostly taking wide receivers at their ADP because when we get to, I guess we might as well, I'll segue into like my lead thing. My lead avoid guys has been the wider where the wide receiver twos are going, the pockets of wide receiver twos, and in that bucket, the Garrett Wilsons, the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, the Terry McLaurin, Xavier Worthy, Mike Evans, Tet McMillan, Travis Hunter. All those guys are going double-digit spots above where I believe that they should be going, and that's kind of why I've been taking wide receiver still, like where Bucky goes, and then these guys start to come off the board, and I'm just like, well, here I brought up Kenneth Walker and James Conner as being guys undervalued. Well, if you have other flavors of choice that you like, the Kyron Williams, the Breece Halls, the James Cooks, the Joe Mixons, all those guys are still going amongst all these players. And I just believe that they have better floors than those wide receivers, and they have largely higher upside than those guys in terms of what a RB1 season value could be from their price points. Again, last year, I don't think this is a situation where we're just trying to say, zig and zag versus what happened last year. It's just that we didn't learn from anything last year. Like the tier of wide receivers after that group of guys that I just named are all comparable still. You brought up Jalen Waddle already earlier. Like you're able to get
Devonta Smith.
So you're able to get all these guys still. And but then running back craters off of that list of the guys that I said. Like once you hit that firewall of guys, you're into the zone where you're shooting just for upside, right? If your roster build is, like last year where we were taking Bucky Irving and Chase Brown, right? Like those are the types of guys you're looking to draft. But wide receiver is still very rich after that group of guys, and it's very nebulous. It's very flat, and like I still look at that group of wide receivers, and I'm just like, these guys are all going too highly again.
So problem is the wide receiver bank dries up quick. Got to grab them while they last. So my comment to that would be, that's why I'm less likely to take a Jonty in the first or a Bucky in the second. I agree with Rich. I can't take Tet McMillan is real. There's a lot of wish casting there, right? I mean, his tape was okay. But I mean, it would not shock me at all if he started very slow. And, look, when you're taking a guy like that in the third round, you're basically needing him to help you advance. It doesn't matter if he goes for 35, 40 points in week 15 or 16 if you finish in 8th place in week 12. Right? You need your third round pick to score fantasy points and have upside. I think that's what Rich is saying. I do like Travis Hunter a lot. I think he is he really jumped off the screen, but I think he is, to expect him to do that right out of the gate, again, your opportunity cost is a lot. I am much more interested in Brian Thomas in the first round than I am in Hunter, where he's going. I agree with Rich. A lot of those wide receivers are good players, but
I feel like you should be, especially where things are right out of the gate, is you should be focusing on these elite wide receivers, and then it gets very flat, and then you can just come back. You can come back and hammer dudes like Sutton and Jameson Williams and Jalen Waddle, George Pickens. All these guys still have that upside outcome still too. It's not even like you're settling for, Deebo Samuel or Stephon Diggs, right? Or Jacoby Myers. Like we're talking high upside players still that exist in the range of outcomes with these other guys that have their ceiling priced in. And ironically, some guys that have failed multiple times, like a Garrett Wilson, right? Like,
of the guys you mentioned, I definitely am okay with Terry McLaurin. I'm okay with Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think he's going to get enough volume. I feel his floor. The problem with a lot of these guys, where they're going, is the floor. I think the ceiling is there. I think the problem is the floor. So JSN, I think, has the floor. I'm okay with Rashee Rice. I'm okay with Mike Devontae Adams, but I am not okay. Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson, I'll take a little bit because of my Fields love. I am not my next guy. You kind of walked into it. Jameson Williams. I just think he's too hit or miss for that ADP.
I mean, like gotta like the floor that we saw to close last season, though. Like he was the kind of what we talked about, like with some of those other guys that you brought up the floor. Because we seen
Okay.
even with Laporta at the end of the year, they really adjusted how they use it. Unless you just don't believe that the loss of Ben Johnson, we don't continue to see this happen. But you look at the front half of the year, he was a very volatile wide receiver. And then after he came back from the 2-game suspension, he had at least 19% of the team targets in 8 of the final 9 games. He had only an 11.5% deep target rate. And then he had his intermediate target rate went up to 35%. Over the first 6 games of the season before his suspension, he had cleared 13.6% of the team targets in just 2 games. 20% of his targets over that opening period were over 20 yards downfield. So again, doubled. And then the intermediate targets were at 26%, so 10% lower. So he did have a very higher floor and became more of that possession type plus the upside. Like he was still giving you the big plays.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Hribar. This is exactly why I think Rich brings something to the table you just don't see with too many analysts. Why I wanted him on the show. I appreciate that a lot about Jameson. Now I want to ask you about Chris Olave and Rome Odunze. Not that they were on. I'm drafting a lot of Olave. I'm not drafting a lot of Odunze, but I just want your thoughts on the two of them.
I mean, Olave is a definitely good player, and he's been a proven good player when he's on the field. The problem is just the Saints situation, right? Like this feels like a very lost season for the Saints. With the quarterback situation. I'm just not really clicking a lot of Saints guys on but even projections, Kamara looks fine, but it's still like projections can only count for so much, right? Because the usage has to go somewhere. But this feels just like a punt season for the Saints. Like this feels like I just kind of don't really want to be along for the ride. I have no pushback if you're taking guys like Olave and Rashid Shaheed, and you're just saying like, hey, I'm just looking to run into a couple weeks, and hopefully that opportunity that these guys project for gives me some weeks in the lineup and I catch some value. Probably more so when we get the season long. Like they just won't be on my list. I am very tried and true. I like to draft good players and good teams. It's I know like I drop a lot of stats and I give you like I tried and true though. I like to draft good players and good teams. Like
I and one of my weaknesses is I fall in love with talented guys on bad teams at times. So yeah. I appreciate that. Give me a name of a guy that you're avoiding.
I got a quarterback here on one that I have to have a quarterback, so it's Baker Mayfield. Just absolutely ADP makes no sense to me whatsoever. Well, I know it does make sense because you're paying for what just happened, but I mean everything that he had in terms of production last year just doesn't seem static at all. He threw 12 passing touchdowns over expectations. That was second in the NFL. He had a career high touchdown rate. His previous career high was 5.6%. It was 7.2% last year. That came in 2018. His touchdown rate the first 2 seasons with Tampa Bay was at 4.9%. You look at the loss of Liam Cohen. He'll now be on his 9th offensive coordinator since being on the NFL. So we'll see what Josh Grizzard brings. He was with Tampa Bay last year.
He's a Grizzard veteran.
Yeah. Baker fumbled 13 times last year and only lost 3. He only lost 3 of them.
I've got Godwin on my list of avoids. And he's
Tampa Bay, you brought up Bucky. Tampa Bay is a team that I do think that when you look from a talent perspective, you're like, all these guys are good. But I do think that they're a screaming regression candidate, and not the kind in air quotes that we were dropping earlier.
The quarterback that I've got on my list is Jordan Love. I think he's very hard to stack because I'm not a Matthew Golden guy. But more than that, they just would rather pound the rock than open up the offense. They play at one of the slowest pace in the league every year. And Jordan Love, we all got excited last year because he had looked so good in a couple playoff games where they had to pass. But you've got a head coach who doesn't mind winning 17-14. I have a hard time getting to Jordan Love, Rich.
Yeah, and that's just kind of what you brought up. I mean, you look at the pace of play both years. He's been a guy he has lived on some efficiency in terms of touchdown production, but he has to, right? Like
Right.
in that system. And they were 31st in the NFL, literally in pass rate, in terms of expectation, in terms of game state. And they actually have an easier schedule this year too. So they're probably going to lean into the run even a little bit more. And you said like the stacking problem, right? Like when you take Jordan Love, you're almost talking yourself into taking like one of these dudes. And they all are just like a gaggle of dudes. Like if it was just Green Bay wide receiver, it'd be fine. But then you're placing a bet on a guy that we just know isn't going to have an elite target share, or you're hoping to get a Romeo Doubs 2 touchdown game, or you hope Jaden Reed can find the field in 2 wide receiver sets, which he won't. You hope Matthew Golden's catching a long bomb. You hope Tucker Kraft's doing something. Like you start to talk yourself into
I like
Kraft,
but Kraft was one of my most owned guys last year, but he was in the last round. He's another guy that I just have trouble clicking right now. Maybe it's Dontavian Wicks, ruined me on all the Packers last year because he was one of my highest owned guys. But all right, throw me out another name. Let's do a couple more and get out of here so that. But this has been really good, Rich. I'm really enjoying this.
I had those guys. Like I said, I'm looking at some of these other guys I might have undervalued. I kind of ran out of guys on my list. I do have Odunze as a guy being overvalued right now for why I have him. And mostly if you look at the wide receivers, and we'll see if this stabilizes because we're also draft fresh, right? Like we're coming off the NFL draft. We all have draft brain. We've been doing rookie drafts. Mm-hmm. We tend to see that the rookie ADPs are a little higher right now where the buzz is, and we'll see what flattens out. But almost all of the rookie guys are the guys that I show just being a little bit, kind of overvalued. And we'll see if just that flattens out. The guys like, especially the guys you have to project, like a Trey Harris, right? Like, why is Trey Harris's ADP where it is?
I don't know. I said in the Spike Week chat, I said, maybe we've gotten to the point where chasing that upside with rookies is, it's gone too far. You know how things always, there's opportunity, and then it's like Wile E. Coyote going over the cliff. I mean, I love Loveland. He was one of my favorite people in the draft. I think Luther Burden could be great. But again, you're also drafting a guy in the 80s who might not play till halfway through the season. I think
we've done this 2 years in a row. We did it with JSN 2 years ago, getting drafted to a team that had established target earners in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And they did it last year with Rome Odunze, getting drafted to a team that had Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, guys who are established target earners. These guys, like, Warren Burden's going to, basically filling those shoes in that offense. It is a new offense. Then you've got guys like Ibuka going to Tampa Bay. He runs into the same year one problem that, why keep making the same mistakes that we've made these past couple years.
Yeah,
the two guys I don't mind if you're throwing darts, if you're taking Jack Besh and you're just hoping like it works out, like he's number 2 on the target tree, or number 2 on the wide receiver tree, 3 in the target tree in that offense, and then Kyle Williams, to the Patriots. Those are guys who are probably starting day one, who don't have it priced in that they're starting in day one. It's those guys I have no real pushback into where they're taking them, where you would be taking them. Other guys I have on my list too. Marvin Mims, his ADP makes no sense. This is a guy that he didn't even run a route on over half of the dropbacks in any game last year.
What about RJ Harvey, if you're talking rookies?
I'm largely fine with it just because of the stigma, but he's probably a little bit rich for me in terms of where he's going.
Him and Hampton, I'm taking some.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with both guys.
I hate myself a little bit every time I do it.
I take those guys more on the early builds where I've just really gone wide receiver heavy, or I didn't get like the insulation of some of the guys that I like at running back. So I need that upside more. I'm banking on the pro apex outcome for those players.
I like Henderson a little bit because I think he he reminded me of Gibbs Light. That same kind, not the as explosive, but he reminded me of Gibbs a little bit. And, that kind of big playability. And he's going a couple rounds later. I don't mind him. I don't like Judkins at ADP. I don't like Golden. I'm just going through real quick. Disagree with me if there's anybody that you.
No, the Browns are just another one of those teams. Like, I'm probably just not going to draft Browns players. Like, I'll mix some. When I say that zero, it's tongue in cheek, but like, I'm going to be underweight on these teams I think are going to be terrible.
Yeah, Egbuka is a guy I have a hard time getting to. I would rather bet, here's a guy I'll bet on. I'll bet on Keon Coleman. He was a guy that I didn't like as much last year. I think Keon Coleman and Josh Palmer are both guys that I don't mind mixing into because what if one of them separates with Josh Allen?
Is that if you take Allen and just in general? Just random.
More with Allen, but I think Palmer, see, what's interesting about Palmer is in half PPR, Coleman is the kind of guy who could get you double-digit touchdowns, right? He's built to score touchdowns. What I like about Josh Palmer, as late as he goes, is he's a 15-yard per catch guy, now going to a guy who has the best arm in the league. And, everyone was tripping over themselves to take the Gabe Davis in the 6th round, in the 8th round, in the 10th round. When Palmer is better at what Gabe Davis was good at, and now nobody wants to draft Palmer. So I think Palmer is that kind of guy that I'm more interested in on Underdog than DraftKings, because you get that 3 for 70 with a touchdown, and it really means something.
Yeah, Palmer's my favorite of the pass catchers, and some little bit of flop lag, just trying to see what happens with Kincaid where he falls. Those are the two guys.
I'm open to that too. I think Coleman played better than he got credit for, and I was not a Coleman guy. But I think he played better. And
especially before his injury, in the back third of the year, he had the 2 games right after they grabbed Amari from the Browns. He had kind of that breakout game against Tennessee, and then he had a really good game against Seattle, and then kind of picked up the injury and just never got back on track coming back from that injury.
And he's, again, half PPR, touchdowns being so important. Give me a guy in the double-digit rounds who can, how many guys in the double-digit rounds can get you double-digit touchdowns? Last name I'm going to throw out, since you kind of finished. My last fade is Jaden Blue. I'm just not buying it. I'm just not buying the hype.
Just buy the Dallas passing game. Well, to be fair, he might be part of that because he is a really good pass catcher.
Yeah.
So if you are doing Dak stuff, maybe he makes a Dak team.
I have no problem with a Dak team. I'm not saying he's a complete fade, but he's
not going to get goal line carries though. Like, there's really no avenue.
He and I think Javonte Williams is actually a decent pick. Again, where is the opportunity in fantasy these days? The big opportunity is when everyone assumes we know something when maybe we don't. And Javonte Williams, everyone was tripping over themselves to draft this guy in the 2nd round after his rookie year, blows out his knee, and now he's on the 3rd year past that injury. We've seen how stubborn Jerry Jones is. A guy like Javonte Williams with 250 carries in the double-digit rounds, who also has pass game chops, is a real good blocking back. I think Javonte Williams is a pretty good pick.
He might just accidentally run into some touchdowns.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting to see what happens there. I mean, they're, like I said, I'm buying the Dallas passing games. They're screaming their throat. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we seen one of the veteran backs actually come away with like some best ball value. Now,
Right.
And like when the season long, like you'll just never know when to start these guys. But I mean, because even Miles Sanders, you can kind of squint and say he's just been hurt the past 2 years. I mean, the last time we seen Miles Sanders on the field last year, he had a 30-point fantasy game.
I'm gonna say this about you know, one of the underrated thing, I've been doing best ball for 10 years. I've seen the crowd catch up to people like me who really put the time in early to understand the format. One thing I don't hear too many people talk about is and we did it today. We talked about players. I'm not taking Javonte Williams with James Conner, but
Right.
I think Javonte. If I've got Travion Henderson, I think Javonte Williams, that kind of stability and of what you're going to get, how you build out your running back rooms,
Yes.
balancing your upside with your floor. I think Javonte Williams fits certain builds better than others.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And like I said, that all depends too where you're, what draft slots you have, what pocket of the summer we're in, because there's going to be some fluidity to where some of these guys go. We're going to have some injuries, unfortunately. We're going to have some things kind of get altered, but you always need to be thinking about how you're shaping up that roster with what types of players and how you're building it out. Like, you just don't want to draft 5 rookie running backs and then log out.
Well, and you want running backs who bring different things to that running back room. Pat Kerrane and Eric Bienfor
Yeah, mine for you.
did a very good podcast, and they coined the phrase chaperones.
Yep.
The guys who aren't exciting who get you there. You mentioned one of them during the podcast. I'd always been a chaperone guy, and I let the cool kids talk me out of them last year. I am back to building more balanced positional rooms that have some guys who will help you advance along with.
You brought up Tony Pollard. I mean, he's in that same bucket of guys. You brought up Tony Pollard. I mean, he's kind of he double dips a little bit. He could be a chaperone guy and then offer some upside.
I just think I just think Pollard is one of those guys who could finish top 10. I think he. In fact, let me look real quick.
Jordan Mason's one of those other guys too.
Well, where was Pollard in yards per game, yards or points per game last year?
In points per game, I'd have to look up for sure. But one thing you have to remember though with them is that Tyjae Spears was hurt, like for the majority of the season.
Well, they both were on and off. They both
were playing Pollard got the bonus though, basically by playing more games where just like the backfield was his. So
and I have
diagnose.
Tyjae was my favorite tape 2 years ago, my most owned player.
I remember you being a big Tyjae guy.
Yeah, so
yeah.
I am not opposed to the Tyjae click. I think he's priced fairly. I just think I think they're priced where the giant running back should be. Like I'm okay with Scatterbo and I'm okay with Tracy, but not at ADP. I mean, I think that if they were going where, I just think the prices are too low for the talent with both Pollard and Spears. I just think
that's another team that's screaming they're going to run the ball more this year too. Like we talked about the offensive line stuff earlier.
I really, I'm a Giant fan, so I have a lot of Giant fans in my timeline. And again, one of the big assumptions I think out there is that Russell Wilson's going to start week 1 and play 7 or 8 games. I think, I keep thinking of that Harry Met Sally line when Billy Crystal comes up to Meg Ryan at the end and says, when you finally realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want that life to start as soon as possible. Yeah. I mean, 16th, 17th round, Jackson Dart with first round Malik Neighbors, I think is a really, really interesting thing. And again, the assumption being that you're not going to get 17 weeks of Dart. What if you do? And what if you get 15 weeks? And what if he's not bad? So I like going against assumptions. And I think that is one of the few edges left, Rich.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Again, you get into the doldrums of the back end of the draft. You gotta fire some of that stuff out. Those
I mean,
the game theory.
how do you not take a dart throw on a guy
Yeah,
named Dart?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, Rich, tell us where you're going to be and where we can see you next.
Yeah, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Still, putting together the draft kit for this offseason, writing up, the tiers and all the players. Well, obviously the big influence this week will be the strength of schedule. We know all the opponents. We're just looking for the order and to plug those bye weeks in because, that's going to shape out how we're building a lot of these teams too. Not that we just totally like hone in on bye weeks, but, we're going to schedule some teams, right? Like we're going to try to build some rosters that match up for playoffs, some things that match up with some bye weeks and sync up. So we'll have that last stone kind of revealed to us on Thursday.
I really think that you guys are best in the business with that stuff. And not just because I used to work with you. I really think that what Warren does and what you guys do with schedule, I think Warren's a bit of a savant with that stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, I mean, yeah, I don't go into the weeds as like because I'm not, looking for a lot of micro edges on as much on the gambling side as I am on the fantasy side. But there'll definitely be things, like I said, I brought up several that people I think are going to get privy to as like the stones get unturned in the order of these teams. Like the 49ers are a team like I said, I want to hammer because I do think that the ADPs and all these guys are going to climb a little bit because they're going to be a team that constantly gets brought up just for like schedule and stuff. Because they're going to score so many points, man.
All right, that is going to do it. A reminder, and I'm glad I've gone from being off and a little nervous about the 49ers to buying in to now being fully on board. Thank you, Rich Hribar, at Lord Reebs on Twitter. The FFPC, if you would like $25 towards your first contest, if you've never played on the FFPC, go to myffpc.com, put the code in DAYLIGHT at the end to get that $25 towards a $35 fantasy team. I hope to have Rich Hribar on again as we get closer to the season. And I thank all of you for listening. Have a great day.